Hey there. So tonight, I thought I'd tell you the story of the Trojan War. You know, that legendary war from Greek mythology with the famous Trojan horse and all those heroes like Achilles, Hector, and Odysseus. It's a story that's been told for over 3,000 years, which is kind of mind-blowing. I mean, think about it. People have been passing this tale on since before the alphabet was even widely used. It's epic. It's dramatic. It's sometimes a little bit crazy. Okay, a lot crazy. And it's absolutely packed with larger-than-life characters and wild twists of fate. Perfect for a nice long bedtime story, right? So get comfy, maybe snuggle into your blanket, and let's dive into the entire saga of the Trojan War in a chill, storytime kind of way. Now, the Trojan War isn't just some random ancient battle. It's basically the war in Greek myth, the backdrop for Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, and a bunch of other stories. And the wildest part? It all started because of a pretty petty argument between goddesses. That's right, divine drama kicked off this whole thing. Let me set the scene. There's this big wedding on Mount Olympus. Fancy, right? Between a Greek hero, Peleus, and a sea nymph, a minor goddess named Thetis. These two are actually the future parents of Achilles, so you know their kid's gonna be important. Anyway, all the gods and goddesses are invited to the wedding, except one, Eris, the goddess of discord, basically the goddess of stirring up trouble. Now, leaving the goddess of discord off your guest list, you can imagine, is asking for chaos. Eris is not pleased about being snubbed, so she decides to crash the party in the most extra way possible. She tosses in a golden apple inscribed with the words for the fairest. Ooh boy, picture this. The moment this golden apple rolls into the feast, 3 powerful goddesses all reach for it. We've got Hera, queen of the gods, Zeus's wife, Athena, goddess of wisdom and war strategy, and Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty. Each one is like, obviously I'm the fairest, that apple is totally mine. Instant diva fight. And we're not talking a mild disagreement. This is a full-on celestial beauty contest showdown. They turn to Zeus, king of the gods, and basically go, hey Zeus, you decide who's the hottest among us. Zeus wisely is like, oh no, I am not touching that with a 10-foot pole. Because can you blame him? If he picks his wife Hera, the other 2 will hate him. If he picks someone else, Hera will definitely hate him. Zeus knows it's a lose-lose scenario, so he says, you know what, let's have a mortal decide. I hear the Trojan prince Paris is a pretty fair judge of beauty. Let him do it. And thus poor Paris is dragged into this cosmic Miss Olympus pageant. So, who is Paris? He's a prince of Troy, a great city on the coast of what is now Turkey. At the time, though, Paris is actually living as a humble shepherd on Mount Ida. Long story short, before he was born, his mother had a nightmare that he would cause Troy's destruction. There was a prophecy about it, so his father King Priam was like, yikes, better get rid of this baby. Baby Paris was left on a mountainside to die, but he was rescued and raised by a shepherd, totally unaware of his royal birth. Drama from birth, this guy. Anyway, along come the 3 goddesses to this shepherd prince, and they ask him to award the golden apple to whichever of them he thinks is most beautiful. And they don't just let him judge fairly. Oh no, each goddess tries to bribe him with a special reward, because apparently even Olympian goddesses play dirty when vanity is on the line. Let's break down the bribes. This is some of the juiciest divine gossip ever. Hera goes first. She basically says, Paris dear, pick me, and it'll make you the king of all Europe and Asia. You'll rule over vast lands, power, and riches, the whole works. Pretty sweet deal for a guy who's, at the time, just herding sheep. Next, Athena makes her offer. Paris, choose me and it'll make you the wisest man and the greatest warrior. You'll never lose a battle. You'll be the ultimate hero and have the ultimate brains. Also tempting, who wouldn't want to be a combo of Einstein and Superman, right? Finally, Aphrodite steps up. She just gives Paris a knowing smile and says, pick me, and he'll give you the most beautiful woman in the world as your wife. Now that gets Paris's attention. The most beautiful woman in the world. He's a young guy and, let's be honest, he's definitely into that idea. So, in what might be the most infamous beauty contest outcome ever, Paris hands the golden apple to Aphrodite, declaring her the fairest. Aphrodite is thrilled. She basically gets bragging rights for eternity. Hera and Athena, on the other hand, are absolutely furious. And I mean furious. They immediately nurse a deep grudge against Paris and, by extension, all of Troy for this insult. Tuck that away for later. Those two are going to make Troy pay big time once the war starts. Hera and Athena are not the forgiving types. Now, Aphrodite has to deliver on her promise. She promised Paris the most beautiful woman in the world. Small catch. That woman is Helen of Sparta, and she happens to be very much married to a Greek king named Menelaus. This is where things start sliding toward war. Helen, often called Helen of Troy in later tales, was originally a Spartan princess, actually the daughter of Zeus himself. According to myth, Zeus had a habit of fathering heroes and famous beauties. She's famously described as the face that launched 1,000 ships, meaning her beauty was so epic that it literally caused kings to launch 1,000 ships to get her back. Side note, someone even joked about a unit of beauty called a Helen, as in, one Helen is enough beauty to launch 1,000 ships. So a milli-Helen would launch just one ship. By that silly math, hopefully your crush is at least a few milli-Helens. Haha. Anyway, Aphrodite, true to her word, causes Helen to fall madly in love with Paris. Alternatively, some versions say Paris visits Helen's court in Sparta on a diplomatic mission and they fall for each other with Aphrodite's nudge. Or more scandalously, Paris just outright abducts Helen and maybe some Spartan treasure while Menelaus is away. One way or another, Paris ends up taking Helen away from her husband Menelaus and whisking her off to Troy as his new love. In some accounts, it's a passionate elopement. In others, it's basically a kidnapping. Either way, not cool. Menelaus comes home to find his wife and some of his gold, if you believe some stories, gone. And when he learns that a Trojan prince has essentially stolen Helen, he is livid. I mean, anyone would be upset if their spouse ran off with a stranger, but in the honor-bound world of ancient Greece, this is an outrageous insult. Menelaus isn't just gonna let that slide. And conveniently, he has a way to rally support for a massive retaliation. See, when Helen was of marrying age, she had a ton of powerful suitors from all over Greece vying for her hand, because she was that renowned for her beauty. To avoid bloodshed among these suitors, Helen's stepfather made all of them swear an oath, known as the Oath of Tyndareus, that they would honor and defend Helen's chosen husband, whoever he may be, and come to his aid if anyone tried to take her away. They all swore this, likely thinking, sure, anything to get a shot at marrying her. Helen ultimately married Menelaus, so now he can invoke that oath. And boy, does he invoke it. Menelaus goes to his older brother, Agamemnon, the king of Mycenae, the most powerful king in Greece at the time, and says, "Brother, my wife's been stolen. We gotta get her back and punish Troy. And hey, all those other fellas swore an oath to help me. Let's call in the army of Greece." Agamemnon, who is ambitious and kinda war-hungry anyway, is totally on board. Perhaps he sees a chance for plunder and glory, and Troy was a rich city controlling key trade routes, so there might have been some geopolitical motive too. So the call goes out across the Greek world. All right, everyone, we're gonna war against Troy. Pack your gear, launch your ships, let's go. And just like that, the greatest alliance of Greek heroes ever is assembled. Basically the all-star team of ancient Greece. It's like the Avengers, but make it Bronze Age. You've got Odysseus, the king of Ithaca, famed for being clever and tricky. Initially, Odysseus doesn't want to go, more on that in a second. You have Achilles, prince of the Myrmidons, the greatest warrior of his generation, maybe of all time. He's still a young man, but already a legend, and crucially, he's half divine and nearly invincible. There's Ajax the Great, a giant of a man, one of the strongest warriors in Greece, and also Ajax the Lesser, a swift and smaller warrior known for his speed and, later, his bad attitude. Diomedes of Argos, a top-notch fighter who will shine in the war. Nestor, the elderly king of Pylos, who comes as an advisor and moral support. He's too old to fight like the youngsters, but he's got experience and stories for days. Menelaus himself, of course, itching to get his wife back and get revenge on Paris. And many more, literally dozens of kings and princes. Homer's Iliad even has a whole chapter listing all the Greek ships and leaders. They say the Greek fleet was over 1,000 ships strong, hence that phrase about Helen launching 1,000 ships. It's an epic gathering. Not everyone is super eager to fulfill this oath and fight a long war overseas. Mind you, a couple of the big names actually try to dodge the draft. One famous example, Odysseus. At the time the call to arms reaches him, Odysseus is chilling at home with his wife Penelope and their brand new baby son, Telemachus. He really doesn't want to leave his family and sail to Troy for who knows how many years. So what does the master trickster do? He fakes insanity. When Agamemnon's envoys arrive at Ithaca, they find Odysseus out in his fields acting completely nuts. He's harnessed a donkey and an ox together. They don't pull well together, obviously, and is plowing in zigzags, sowing salt into the soil instead of seed, muttering gibberish, basically putting on a show of being non-compos mentis. The envoys are baffled, like, is he okay? But one guy, Palamedes, a very smart Greek prince, is suspicious that it's an act. To test Odysseus, Palamedes takes baby Telemachus and lays the infant right in the path of the plow. Odysseus, pretending to be crazy, is coming along with his plow. And at the last second, he swerves to avoid running over his child. That gives him away. A truly insane person wouldn't likely have noticed. Palamedes is like, "Aha, you're sane. You almost fooled us, but nobody in their right mind would plow over their own son. Pack your bags, Odysseus, you're coming to Troy." Odysseus is caught and reluctantly has to join the war. He's not happy about it, and fun fact, he never forgives Palamedes for outfoxing him. During the war, there's a tale that Odysseus takes revenge by framing Palamedes as a traitor, getting him executed. Messed up, I know, but that's later in the story. Another reluctant hero, Achilles himself, surprisingly. He's prophesied to either live a long, quiet life or die young with everlasting glory. And guess where that glory happens? Troy. His mother Thetis, the sea nymph, knows that if Achilles goes to Troy, he's fated to die there, even though hell earn eternal fame. Mama ain't cool with that, so she tries to prevent him from going. She actually hides Achilles in a rather unorthodox way. She sends him to a far-off island called Skyros and disguises him as one of the king's daughters. So Achilles, the mightiest warrior to be, is literally cross-dressing and living among the princesses under the alias Pyrrha. He's a burly teenager, but apparently he passes as a tall girl for a while. When the Greek envoys come looking for Achilles, because an oracle said they need Achilles for victory, they can't find him at first. But clever Odysseus is among them, having given up on the crazy act by now. Odysseus devises a little trick. He presents some merchants bearing gifts to the court of Skyros. A table of frilly dresses, jewelry, and girly trinkets is displayed, and on another table some weapons and armor. Then he has a war trumpet sounded as if the island were under attack. All the real princesses scream and run away from the weapons, but one maiden leaps up and grabs a spear and shield, ready to fight. Aha, that maiden is Achilles in disguise. Instincts betrayed him. Odysseus grins. Found ya. So Achilles, caught, has to fess up, realizing he can't escape his fate, and frankly, a part of him wants the glory. Achilles agrees to join the Greeks. So now we have our superstar warrior on board too. With all these heroes assembled, the Greek fleet gathers at the port of Aulis. They prepare to sail to Troy and get this war started. Over 1,000 ships fill the harbor, troops ready, swords and spears gleaming. And then, nothing happens, because there's no wind. Day after day, a complete dead calm. The ships can't sail across the Aegean without wind. This is the age of sail and oar. They start wondering if they offended the gods. Sure enough, the seer Calchas reveals that Artemis, the goddess of the hunt and a deity who can control winds and the natural world, is super angry at the Greeks. Why? Turns out King Agamemnon offended Artemis. Accounts differ, but one popular version is that Agamemnon boastfully killed a sacred deer and bragged he was a better hunter than Artemis. Not smart. So Artemis stopped the winds as divine payback. And the only way to appease her? A really awful sacrifice. Agamemnon must sacrifice his own daughter, Iphigenia, to Artemis. Yeah. Imagine being told you have to sacrifice your child. Agamemnon is devastated and initially in utter disbelief. Like, no way. There must be some other way. But the army is stuck and growing restless, and his brother Menelaus is pressuring him. We need to sail, now. In the end, Agonizingly, Agamemnon decides to go through with it to fulfill his duty as leader. He tricks Iphigenia into coming to Aulis, telling her she's to marry Achilles, which is so cruel, and when she arrives, depending on the telling, either Agamemnon carries out the sacrifice or the priests do. In some versions, Artemis mercifully swaps Iphigenia at the last second with a deer on the altar, saving the girl and whisking her away to serve as a priestess elsewhere. But in other versions, Iphigenia is indeed killed. In either case, from the perspective of the Greek army, the sacrifice happens. And immediately afterward, as the myth goes, the winds pick up. Artemis is appeased, or the semblance of attempting it appeased her. It's a grim, tragic moment that will have consequences later. Agamemnon's wife Clytemnestra, Iphigenia's mother, will never forgive him for this and will plan some deadly revenge of her own. But for now, the path to Troy is clear. The massive Greek armada sets sail across the sea toward Troy, after some travel and a side adventure or two, like one where they accidentally land in the wrong place and Achilles wounds a local king. The Greeks finally reach the coast of Troy. Imagine hundreds of warships arriving on the horizon, coming ashore on the beaches near the city of Troy. The Trojans see this and scramble to defend their land. Now there's an eerie prophecy that says the first Greek to step foot on Trojan soil will be the first to die. So when the ships land, the warriors hesitate a moment. Finally, a bold Greek named Protesilaus says essentially, well, somebody's got to be first, and leaps off his ship onto the beach. He survives the jump. But shortly after, in the first clash of the war, Protesilaus is indeed killed. Some say by the Trojan prince Hector in single combat. The prophecy is fulfilled in a sad way. Later on, in a touching myth, the gods allow Protesilaus' ghost to visit his grieving wife back home one last time because she is so distraught. And when that brief reunion is over, she ends up taking her own life to join him. These myths really go heavy on the tragedy. After that, the Greek forces surge onto the beach and battle is joined. The Trojan army, led by Prince Hector, King Priam's eldest son and their greatest fighter, meets them on the shore. There's intense fighting, but the Trojans are pushed back to the city walls. Troy, by the way, has massive walls, towering, thick fortifications that were said to have been built by the gods Poseidon and Apollo in an earlier era. These walls make Troy extremely hard to capture by force. The Greeks quickly realize that just storming the walls isn't going to work. A siege is necessary. So the Greeks set up camp on the plain outside the city and basically settle in for a long fight. What follows is a war that, according to tradition, lasts 10 years. In truth, the full cycle of stories, including travels home, covers maybe 20 or even 30 years, but the actual fighting at Troy is usually said to be a 10-year siege. 10 years is a long time to be at war, especially in those days. Fun fact, some ancient sources said the Trojan War saga lasted so long that it basically spanned a generation. One account from the epic cycle claims 30 years from start to finish, which is wild considering the average Bronze Age life expectancy was maybe around that. So yeah, a lot of these soldiers spent pretty much their entire prime fighting at Troy. The war in its early years is basically a stalemate. Neither side can deliver a decisive blow. The Greeks can't breach the walls of Troy, and the Trojans can't drive the Greeks back into the sea either, especially with fierce fighters like Achilles on the Greek side. So what do? They raid and skirmish. For years, the Greeks roam the surrounding region, sacking Trojan-allied towns to cut off resources and to gather plunder and food. In one of those raids, early on, Achilles captures a woman named Briseis, who becomes his war prize/concubine, and Agamemnon captures a woman named Chryses. Keep those names in mind. They will cause major drama later. There are occasional full battles and duels. Early in the war, the Greeks and Trojans even meet to duel it out man-to-man. For instance, Menelaus and Paris at one point agree to fight one-on-one to settle the dispute over Helen, since really this whole war is over those two. In that duel, Menelaus absolutely overpowers Paris, who is not known for great fighting skill, especially compared to men like Menelaus. Menelaus is dragging Paris by the helmet, about to finish him, and it looks like, okay, war's over right here, Menelaus wins. But Aphrodite isn't about to let her boy Paris die. She suddenly whisks Paris away in a cloud of magic, just as Menelaus is about to strike the killing blow. 1 second Paris is there, the next poof, he's gone from the battlefield. spirited back to his bedroom in Troy by Aphrodite. Menelaus is standing there like, huh? Where'd he go? The duel ends inconclusively because, well, the opponent vanished. Menelaus and the Greeks call it a win by default. Hand Helen back now, they shout. But the Trojans aren't sure what happened. Some divine interference was suspected. Then one foolish Trojan archer, cough Pandarus cough, breaks the temporary truce by shooting an arrow at Menelaus, wounding him slightly, and that reignites the fighting. So the war continues. That one-on-one duel could have ended it early, but nope, the gods had other ideas. Year after year, the war drags on. The Greeks become frustrated. Many just want to go home. At one low point, Agamemnon actually tests the troops by suggesting, fine, this is hopeless, let's sail back home. And to his surprise, a huge cheer goes up and the rank-and-file soldiers rush for the ships. They were really about to leave. Odysseus has to run out and physically stop them, rallying them with a speech, reminding them of the heroic code and probably saying something like, hey, we can't give up now. The prophecy says Troy will fall in the 10th year. Don't quit at the finish line. The troops grumble but come back. It's a close call. Morale was low at times. Now, most of the famous events of the Trojan War actually occur in the final year, year 10. This is where Homer's Iliad zooms in on the story. The Iliad doesn't cover the whole war. It really focuses on a few weeks in the 10th year, especially on the wrath of Achilles and its consequences. So let's set the stage for that. Remember those two captive women, Briseis with Achilles and Chryseis with Agamemnon? Well, a big crisis comes out of that situation. Chryseis, Agamemnon's prize, is the daughter of Chryses, a priest of Apollo. Her father dearly wants her back, so he comes to the Greek camp with a hefty ransom, begging Agamemnon to release her. Agamemnon arrogantly refuses and basically tells him to get lost. The old man, hurt and angered, prays to Apollo for help. Apollo, god of plagues among other things, responds swiftly. He sends a plague into the Greek camp. Suddenly, a mysterious sickness starts killing Greek soldiers and animals day after day. After 10 days of this, the Greeks are freaking out. Achilles calls an assembly and says, we need to figure out why Apollo is angry at us. Calchas the seer, encouraged by Achilles, who promises to protect him if he speaks the hard truth, reveals Apollo's priest was dishonored by Agamemnon. We must give Chryseis back to her father with compensation to lift the plague. Agamemnon is furious hearing this. He feels publicly shamed. But he finally relents, fine, I'll return the girl to stop the plague. However, Agamemnon immediately asserts his kingly privilege. But if I lose my prize, I'll take your prize to compensate. And he eyes Achilles. Sure enough, Agamemnon sends his men to seize Briseis from Achilles. This is a huge insult. Achilles is the one actually doing most of the fighting and winning, and Agamemnon, who sits back commanding, just takes Achilles' war prize. Talk about a blow to Achilles' honor and pride. Achilles absolutely explodes with anger. He confronts Agamemnon in front of everyone, calling him greedy, shameless, a dog face, and all sorts of colorful ancient insults. It gets so heated that Achilles actually draws his sword, ready to stab Agamemnon then and there. In the Iliad, the goddess Athena suddenly appears and grabs Achilles by the hair, invisible to others, telling him, whoa there, big guy, cool it. Kill him later in battle if you must, but not here. Achilles, veins bulging, obeys the goddess and restrains himself, barely. Instead, Achilles unleashes a torrent of verbal abuse and basically says, you know what? Quit. Fight this war without me. See how you do. Agamemnon's men come and take Briseis away from Achilles' tent, leading her to Agamemnon. Achilles is left fuming. He is so enraged and insulted that he withdraws himself and his troops, the Myrmidons, from the war. He goes to the beach, prays to his mother Thetis, and asks her to convince Zeus to make the Greeks start losing horribly so that they realize how much they need Achilles. Pretty spiteful, but that's how hurt his pride is. Thetis does exactly that. She goes to Zeus, and Zeus, owing Thetis a favor from way back, agrees to let the Trojans start kicking Greek butt for a while, just to teach Agamemnon and company a lesson. So now we have the greatest Greek hero sulking in his tent, refusing to fight, and on top of that Zeus tipping the scales against the Greeks. This is when things get very bad for the Greeks on the battlefield. With Achilles out of action, the Trojans, led by Hector, push the Greeks hard. They drive them back toward their camp and ships. Suddenly, battles that the Greeks used to dominate are going in favor of the Trojans. Even the gods are taking sides more openly now. Hera and Athena, still bitter about the beauty contest, are firmly on the Greek side, but frustrated because Zeus is temporarily favoring the Trojans, while Apollo and Aphrodite are boosting the Trojans. Apollo because his priest was wronged and he likes Hector, Aphrodite of course for Paris and Aeneas. Ares, the war god, actually ends up siding with the Trojans too, mostly because he's Aphrodite's lover and she asks him to, so there's divine chaos too. A lot of intense fighting happens here. The Iliad gives us some spectacular battle scenes in Achilles' absence. One Greek hero, Diomedes, has his moment of glory. In one battle, he goes on a rampage so epic that he actually wounds two gods. With Athena guiding him, Diomedes spears Aphrodite in the wrist when she tries to save her son Aeneas, causing her to drop Aeneas and flee Olympus crying in pain. To be fair, war isn't really Aphrodite's forte. Then Diomedes even squares off with Ares. Athena helps him again, and Diomedes actually stabs Ares in the gut, making the war god bellow and run off to Zeus complaining. It's not every day a mortal makes gods bleed, so big props to Diomedes. Despite such heroics, the Trojans, under Hector's inspiring leadership, keep gaining ground. They manage to break through the Greek fortifications and even set fire to one of the Greek ships. It's looking dire for the Greeks. With the situation desperate, the Greeks beg Achilles to come back. Agamemnon even swallows his pride somewhat and sends an embassy offering Achilles heaps of treasure and even Briseis back, swearing he never touched her, plus apologies and all that. Just, please, Achilles, return and help us. Achilles, still seething, refuses. He basically says, screw all of you. Not even if Agamemnon gave me all the gold in Egypt would I rejoin you. I'm not fighting anymore, and I'm definitely not risking my life to save that ungrateful bunch. His friends, including his closest buddy Patroclus, are disappointed that Achilles won't let go of his grudge even as their comrades are dying. And indeed, things get worse. The Trojans, led by Hector, make a massive push that almost drives the Greeks into the sea. They are literally at the Greek ships, burning them. At that critical moment, Patroclus can't take it anymore. Patroclus is Achilles' best friend. Some argue they were lovers, but either way, they were extremely close. They grew up together and Achilles loves him dearly. Patroclus pleads with Achilles, if you want fight, at least let me put on your armor and lead your men to save the ships. The Trojans will think you have returned and it might scare them off. Achilles, moved by Patroclus's concern and not wanting to see the Greeks utterly lose, agrees, but he gives Patroclus strict instructions. Drive the Trojans back from our camp, but do not chase them to the walls of Troy. Don't go near the city, promise me. Patroclus promises. Achilles then lends Patroclus his own glorious armor. And so, Patroclus leads Achilles' troops into battle, wearing Achilles' distinctive armor. When the Trojans see what appears to be Achilles storming onto the field again, they panic and start retreating from the ships. Patroclus fights fiercely. Remember, he's not Achilles' level, but he's no slouch either, and the Greeks rally behind what they think is Achilles returned. The Trojans get pushed back across the plain, away from the Greek camp. In the adrenaline of success, Patroclus forgets Achilles' warning and pursues the Trojans all the way to the very gates of Troy. This is where fate catches up with him. At the gates of Troy, Patroclus encounters Hector and other Trojan heroes. But first, the god Apollo intervenes from behind. Apollo, who is pro-Trojan, sees Patroclus in Achilles' armor causing havoc and decides to put a stop to it. Apollo sneaks up and whacks Patroclus, dazing him and knocking off his helmet. Patroclus, stunned, is then struck by a spear thrown by a young Trojan named Euphorbus, weakening him further. Finally, Hector closes in and finishes Patroclus off with a spear thrust. It's a dramatic, tragic moment. Patroclus falls, mortally wounded. As he's dying, he murmurs a prophecy that Achilles will avenge him. Hector takes Achilles' armor off Patroclus' body, claiming it as spoils. Now Hector is literally wearing Achilles' armor, which is a bit grim. When news reaches Achilles that Patroclus, his dear friend, has been killed, and killed by Hector no less. Achilles is absolutely devastated. Grief and rage like never before consume him. He blames himself terribly for letting Patroclus go out there. Achilles goes into deep mourning. We're talking ugly crying, rolling in the dirt with sorrow. Then he swears a terrible oath. He will personally slay Hector with his own hands to avenge Patroclus, even though he knows, because his mother told him, that doing so might seal his own doom shortly after. Achilles' mother Thetis comes to comfort him, and Achilles tells her, "I don't care if I die soon. I cannot live unless I make Hector pay for killing Patroclus." Seeing her son's absolute determination, Thetis gets Hephaestus, the blacksmith god, to forge Achilles a brand new set of magnificent armor. Because remember, Hector took the old armor. This new armor is god-crafted, shiny and nearly impenetrable, complete with a beautiful, intricately detailed shield. Once Achilles has his new armor, he emerges from his tent to rejoin the battle. But first, he has a reconciliation meeting with Agamemnon. Agamemnon basically goes, "Look, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Blame it on Zeus or fate or something. Here, take all the gifts I promised, including Briseis back." Achilles is over it. His mind is so set on vengeance that he doesn't even care about the gifts or Briseis right now. He essentially says, "All right, whatever, let's just get on with the fighting. Hector dies today." With that settled, Achilles steps onto the battlefield, and the whole tide of war dramatically shifts in an instant. The sight of Achilles, now blazing with wrath, in godly armor, finally back after sitting out, strikes fear into the Trojans. Many of them literally start running the moment he appears. Achilles doesn't even engage in diplomacy or challenges. He just charges. And what follows is basically a one-man slaughter. Achilles goes on the rampage to end all rampages. The Trojans, without Hector right beside them, Hector initially withdraws when he sees Achilles coming, because even he knows Achilles in this state is unstoppable, get massacred in droves. Achilles is merciless. He even fights the river Scamander at one point. Yes, the river itself. He kills so many Trojan soldiers that their bodies choke the river, and the river god, Scamander, gets angry and rises up in a flood to try and drown Achilles. Achilles, even while nearly getting washed away, keeps slaying. It actually takes the gods intervening. Hera sends Hephaestus to blast the river with fire to boil it down, to save Achilles from the angry river. It's wild. Achilles is literally too much for nature itself. Finally, Achilles zeroes in on Hector. By now, the Trojan forces have retreated behind the walls of Troy, with Hector standing virtually alone outside the Scaean gate, determined to face Achilles, despite his family begging him to come inside. But when the moment comes and Achilles is charging at him like an avenging spirit, even brave Hector's nerve falters. Hector runs. He straight up takes off and Achilles chases him. They start running around the city of Troy. Not once, not twice, 3 times, Achilles and Hector circle the entire perimeter of the city walls in this deadly game of tag, with the Trojan soldiers watching from the ramparts and cheering Hector on, and the Greeks watching from afar. You gotta imagine, in another context, it would almost look comical, the greatest Trojan hero sprinting for his life with the furious greatest Greek hero on his heels. But it's deadly serious. Finally, the goddess Athena, who wants Achilles to win, decides to intervene. She appears to Hector in the form of his brother Deiphobus, tricking Hector into thinking he has an ally joining him to fight Achilles. Hector stops running and turns to face Achilles, thinking, "Okay, I've got backup, we can do this." But when he looks again, his brother is gone. Athena's tricked him and vanished. Hector realizes he's been duped by the gods and now stands alone. Mustering his courage, Hector makes a final stand. He and Achilles face each other. Hector, knowing he might die, still asks Achilles for a pact. Whichever of us wins will treat the other's body with respect, no mutilation. Just return it to the family. Achilles, still boiling with rage, basically snarls, "There are no pacts between lions and men," meaning, "I'm the lion, you're the man. I'm not making any promises to you." And with that, the fight is on. Hector throws his spear. It hits Achilles' shield but does no harm. This shield is God-made, remember. Achilles then hurls his own spear. It misses Hector initially, flying past. Athena, invisibly, retrieves it and hands it back to Achilles. Cheating a bit, but hey, after some circling, Hector charges with his sword. Achilles knows exactly where the weak point is on the armor Hector's wearing. Ironically, it's Achilles' old armor. Achilles thrusts his spear and hits the gap at Hector's neck, mortally wounding him. Down goes Hector, the pride of Troy. As Hector lies dying, he uses his last breaths to beg Achilles. "Please, I implore you, return my body to my parents. Have mercy," is a heart-rending plea. But Achilles is still deep in bloodlust and grief. He growls, "Beg me not, you dog," and basically says he'd like to hack Hector's flesh and eat it raw if he could. That's how vengeful he feels. Yikes. He promises nothing regarding Hector's body. Hector then, with his final breath, foretells, "Beware, Achilles. You will die at these very gates, by Paris and Apollo." Achilles doesn't care at this point. With that, Hector dies. Achilles, still not satisfied, proceeds to do something that shocks everyone. He ties Hector's body by the ankles to the back of his chariot. Then he drives his chariot, dragging Hector's body in the dust around the walls of Troy for all to see. It's a horrendous insult to Hector's memory and to the Trojans watching from the ramparts. Hector was their champion, and now his corpse is being desecrated. Even the gods are like, "Oh boy, that's a bit much." King Priam and Queen Hecuba, Hector's father and mother, witness this from the walls and are devastated, wailing in agony. It's one of the most tragic scenes. The fall of Troy's greatest son in such a manner. Achilles takes Hector's body back to the Greek camp, tossing it in the dirt near Patroclus's funeral bier. Achilles then holds an elaborate funeral for Patroclus. They burn Patroclus's body on a huge pyre, and Achilles sacrifices 12 captured Trojan youths at the pyre. Yep, he kills a dozen prisoners as offerings. He's that hardcore in his revenge, not exactly a noble moment for Achilles. They also slaughter horses and other animals for the funeral. It's a massive send-off. Then Achilles places Patroclus's ashes in a golden urn. He declares that when he dies, they should mix his ashes with Patroclus's so they can rest together. After the funeral, every day for the next while, Achilles in his grief and rage keeps dragging Hector's tied corpse around Patroclus's tomb, morning and evening. It's grim and frankly pretty disturbing to everyone. Amazingly, due to divine intervention, Apollo and Aphrodite preserve Hector's body from decay or damage. The body remains intact and unrotted despite this abuse. But clearly, Achilles is not letting this go, even though Hector is dead. The gods on Olympus decide something needs to be done. Achilles has to let Hector's body be honored. Zeus sends word, via Iris, to King Priam of Troy that he should go in person to the Greek camp and ransom his son's body. This is an extremely dangerous idea. An unarmed elderly king walking into the camp of the enemy who just killed his son. But Priam's fatherly love overpowers any fear. One night, guided by the god Hermes in disguise, Priam takes a wagon full of treasure and slips into the Greek camp. He finds Achilles' tent. Achilles is astonished when the old king of Troy, of all people, steps inside. Priam kneels and begs Achilles for Hector's body. In one of the most emotional moments in literature, Priam says, "Think of your own father, Achilles, and how he would feel in my position. I have kissed the hand of the man who killed my son." He actually kisses Achilles' hands, which are still red with Hector's blood. Achilles is deeply moved. The raw grief and courage of Priam pierce through Achilles' anger. Achilles starts to weep as well, thinking of his aged father Peleus back home and of his lost friend Patroclus. In that moment, Achilles' rage finally subsides into empathy. He gently lifts Priam up and agrees. He will return Hector's body. In fact, Achilles personally has the body cleaned and anointed by his attendants, so Priam won't see the gore, and places it on Priam's wagon. Achilles and Priam even share a quiet meal together that night, former enemies, finding a moment of human connection in their mutual grief. Achilles also grants Priam a truce. He says the fighting will halt for 12 days to allow the Trojans time for proper funeral rites for Hector. Priam thanks Achilles profoundly and returns to Troy with Hector's body. What follows in Troy is a scene of mourning. Hector's wife Andromache, his mother Hecuba, and even Helen, who by now sees Hector as someone who was kind to her when others scorned her, all give moving laments over Hector's corpse. The Trojans conduct Hector's funeral with great honor. They burn his body on a pyre, collect the bones into a golden urn, and bury them beneath a mound in the city. And thus ends the Iliad, essentially with Hector buried and Achilles having shown a moment of compassion, hinting that even in war, humanity can shine through briefly. But that's not the end of the war. Troy still hasn't fallen yet, and Achilles is still alive for now. After the events of the Iliad, the fighting resumes, but the momentum is shifting. Achilles, though briefly softened, goes back to battle. Some myths say he even found and killed Troilus, a young Trojan prince, in this late stage, a prophetic thing, since there was a saying Troy wouldn't fall if Troilus lived to 20, but Achilles ambushed him earlier. The Trojans are now without Hector, their main pillar. They do get some help from outside though, a couple of notable late-arriving allies. First, the Amazons, a tribe of warrior women from the east, led by their queen Penthesilea, arrive to aid Troy. The Trojans are heartened by this. Penthesilea is a fierce fighter, and in some versions, she's seeking redemption because she accidentally killed her own sister and wants an honorable death. She and her Amazon warriors jump into battle and cause quite a stir. Penthesilea actually confronts Achilles, and they duel one-on-one. She fights bravely, but ultimately Achilles, who is basically in God mode on the battlefield, overcomes and kills Penthesilea. As Achilles thrusts his spear and Penthesilea falls, their eyes meet, and one legend says Achilles is so struck by her beauty and valor that he feels profound remorse, and maybe even love, as she dies. It's a tragic little twist. Achilles essentially falls for the woman he just killed. One of the Greek soldiers, a nasty guy named Thersites, the same one who was a jerk in the Iliad assembly, mocks Achilles mercilessly for allegedly getting soft over an Amazon he slew. Achilles, still in a volatile state, ends up killing Thersites on the spot by punching him or stabbing him. Yep, Achilles kills an annoying comrade for mouthing off. This causes a bit of a squabble among the Greeks. Thersites was a cousin of Diomedes, and Diomedes gets mad that Achilles killed a Greek. Achilles has to do some ritual purification for murdering a fellow Greek, but ultimately everyone lets it go. No one liked Thersites much anyway, and they need Achilles. Next, Memnon, the king of Ethiopia, often interpreted as representing African or Eastern allies of Troy, he's sometimes said to be the son of the dawn goddess Eos, arrives with a host of warriors to help Troy. Memnon is a mighty warrior with armor made by Hephaestus, almost a parallel to Achilles in skill. In the ensuing battle, Memnon and Achilles face off. They're both demigods, so it's an epic clash. In the fight, Memnon actually manages to kill Antilochus, who is Nestor's son and a close friend of Achilles. He sacrificed himself to save his father Nestor from Memnon's spear. Achilles, enraged by Antilochus' death, confronts Memnon. Zeus even weighs their fates on his scales, and Memnon's fate sinks, meaning he's destined to lose. Sure enough, after a great duel, Achilles kills Memnon. Memnon's army flees, and Eos, the dawn, weeps for her son. They say that's why morning dew falls. It's the tears of Eos for Memnon. Now, with the Amazons and Memnon gone, Troy is absolutely on the brink. But fate hasn't forgotten Achilles. Not long after Memnon's death, as the Greeks press the attack to the walls of Troy, Achilles meets his own end. Remember Hector's dying prophecy and many other hints? The time has come. As Achilles approaches the Scaean gate of Troy, some say he was in pursuit of Trojans, others that he was even going to meet with Trojan King Priam in a moment of truce regarding one of Priam's daughters, Polyxena. But at that vulnerable moment, Paris, of all people, manages to strike. With Apollo guiding his aim, Paris lets fly an arrow from the walls. That arrow hits Achilles in his one vulnerable spot. Now, in the earliest accounts, Achilles was killed by a random arrow with Apollo's involvement. Later tradition specifies it was his heel, the famous Achilles' heel, the only part of him not protected when his mother dipped him in the river Styx as an infant. She held him by the heel. So the arrow, often said to be poisoned, hits Achilles' heel, the one spot that wasn't invincible. Achilles collapses, and thus Paris, the non-heroic pretty boy, aided by Apollo, manages to fatally wound the greatest hero of the Greeks. Achilles dies there, by the same gates where he slew Hector. A massive fight breaks out over Achilles' body because the Greeks absolutely will not allow the Trojans to capture Achilles' corpse. Imagine if Trojans got hold of it. They'd mutilate it in revenge for Hector, and also it would crush Greek morale. The greater Ajax, the son of Telamon, in particular shines here. He plows into the Trojans and, with incredible strength, hoists Achilles' body onto his shoulders and carries it out of the fray, while Odysseus and others fend off the Trojans. The Greeks successfully retrieve Achilles' body. They mourn hugely. Their biggest hero is gone. They hold an elaborate funeral for Achilles, similar to Patroclus's. They burn his remains on a pyre, put his ashes in a golden urn, some say mixing them with Patroclus's as promised, and bury them under a mound by the sea. It's said that Achilles' soul went to a special afterlife, maybe the Isles of the Blessed or Elysium, where he eventually found some peace, though in the Odyssey's underworld scene, Achilles' ghost is kinda grumpy about dying young despite the glory. Now Achilles is gone, yet Troy still has to fall, and the Greeks know they have to get crafty to finish this war. A few important events and prophecies come into play. First, it's prophesied that Troy cannot fall until Neoptolemus, also called Pyrrhus, who is Achilles' son, fights at Troy, so the Greeks send an embassy to fetch Neoptolemus from Skyros. They bring the young man, who's basically late teens at this point, to the war. Neoptolemus dons his father's armor, Achilles had spare armor, or maybe he wears Achilles' old armor recovered from Hector. He's brutal and eager to prove himself. Second, it's foretold that Troy won't fall until Philoctetes, the archer who possesses Heracles' bow and poisoned arrows, is brought to Troy. Remember him? The Greeks had abandoned Philoctetes on Lemnos years ago because of his snakebite wound's foul smell. Well, that stinky karma comes back. They need him now. Odysseus and Diomedes, or in some versions Odysseus and Neoptolemus, sail back to Lemnos to get Philoctetes. They find him still alive, still suffering from his wound, and still understandably bitter. Initially, Philoctetes is like, "Get lost. You jerks left me here to rot." But with either some persuasion or maybe divine healing of his wound by Asclepius' son, Philoctetes is convinced to join them, particularly because he'd love to get revenge on the Trojans after suffering for so long. So Philoctetes returns to the Greek camp, bow in hand. Good timing, because guess who's still lingering in Troy largely unscathed? Paris. And fate isn't done with him either. Soon after Philoctetes arrives, Paris ends up in a combat situation. Some say he arrogantly challenges Philoctetes, or one of Philoctetes' friends. Philoctetes uses that famous bow of Heracles and shoots Paris with an arrow. That hydrovenom arrow strikes true. Some versions say it hits Paris in the torso or leg. Paris is mortally wounded, the poison is incurable. As he lies in agony, Paris suddenly remembers, "Oh yeah, I know someone who could possibly heal me. Oenone." Now, Oenone is a name we haven't mentioned yet. She was a nymph, Paris's first wife/lover back when he was a shepherd on Mount Ida. She had the gift of healing from Apollo. Paris abandoned her when he went off with Helen, but Oenone once told him, "If ever you are wounded, come to me and I can heal you." So now Paris, desperate, either is carried or sends word to Oenone asking for her help. But Oenone has not exactly forgiven Paris for ditching her. Initially, she refuses, reportedly telling the messenger, "Why don't you go ask Helen to save him? I'm sure she has that power." Sarcasm. Paris ends up dying of his wound. Some stories say that as he died, Oenone had a change of heart and came running to help, but it was too late, and in grief Oenone then killed herself. Either way, Paris is dead. The one who started all this by taking Helen is now gone. Helen is actually kind of relieved in some accounts, or at least not too broken up. Her feelings about Paris by the end were complicated, possibly. Now Troy has lost both of Priam's warrior sons, Hector and Paris. The only Trojans of note left are mostly old King Priam and some younger princes like Helenus, a seer, and Polyxena, a daughter. Troy's situation is beyond desperate, and the Greeks know victory is near. But the walls are still high and strong frontal assaults haven't worked for 10 years. This is where Odysseus truly shines with his devious genius. He concocts the plan of all plans, the Trojan horse. The idea is bold and a little insane. trick the Trojans into letting the Greeks inside their impregnable city. How? Build a giant wooden horse, hide a select group of Greek warriors inside it, and pretend to abandon the siege, leaving the horse as an offering or gift. Count on Trojan curiosity and maybe their religious piety to bring the horse into the city, and then voila, night falls. Greeks come out of the horse and open the gates for the rest of the Greek army, which would sail back under cover of darkness. Odysseus presents this plan and the Greeks are like, huh, you know what, nothing else has worked. Let's do it. So they get to work. The master carpenter Hippias builds an enormous hollow wooden horse on wheels. It's huge, tall enough to tower over the Trojan walls when they bring it in. They make sure it can fit dozens of men in its belly. When it's done, lots are drawn or volunteers chosen for who will hide inside. Odysseus, of course, leads the infiltration team. Depending on the version, around 30 to 50 Greek warriors cram inside this wooden horse, including Menelaus, Diomedes, Neoptolemus, Philoctetes perhaps, and others, basically the bravest and best, because it's a do-or-die mission. Then the Greeks execute the ruse. One morning, the Trojans look out from their walls and the Greek beach camp is empty. The siege is apparently lifted. The Greek ships are gone, sailed away overnight. What actually happened is the fleet didn't go far. They just hid behind a nearby island, Tenedos, out of sight. All that's left on the beach are the charred remains of the Greek camp. And, sitting alone on the sand, this enormous, mysterious wooden horse. Also left behind is one single Greek man, Sinon, looking as if he deserted or was left behind. The Trojans are like, what the heck is this? In comes Sinon, pretending to be terrified of the Greeks and grateful the Trojans found him. The Trojans, curious but cautious, ask him who he is and what this giant horse is about. Sinon spins a masterful lie. Odysseus coached him well. He claims, oh, I escaped from the Greeks. Those jerks were going to sacrifice me to get a good wind home, so I ran off. The Greeks are gone now. They got in their ships and abandoned the fight. This horse is a sacred offering to Athena. See, the Greeks stole the Palladium, Troy's sacred statue of Athena, earlier, which made Athena mad at them. They built this huge horse as an apology to Athena, hoping for a safe journey home. They made it oversized on purpose so you Trojans couldn't possibly move it into your city. Because, well, if you did bring it inside, legend has it you'd gain Athena's favor and Troy would be impregnable. The Trojans listen to Sinon's story. It's elaborate and intriguing. Some are skeptical, though. One Trojan priest, Laocoon, is extremely suspicious. He basically says the famous line, beware of Greeks bearing gifts. Laocoon is like, this is not a good idea, people. I do not trust this giant horse one bit. It could be a trick, there might be Greek soldiers hiding in it, or it could be some kind of destructive device. We should burn it right now. And Laocoon dramatically hurls a spear into the side of the wooden horse, just to prove his point. The spear hits the horse with a hollow thunk. Some tellings say the Greeks inside almost made a noise when that happened. Imagine them sitting in there, heart pounding, as a spear tip pokes through. But fortunately the Trojans outside don't hear anything suspicious. In that tense moment, something very dramatic happens that basically seals Troy's fate. As Laocoon finishes shouting his warnings, suddenly, over by the seashore, two enormous sea serpents emerge from the waves and slither onto land. Everyone freaks out, understandably. These giant snakes beeline straight for Laocoon and his two sons who are standing with him. The serpents coil around them and crush them, killing Laocoon and both boys in a horrific fashion right in front of the crowd of Trojans. Then the snakes slither off to the temple of Apollo and disappear. The Trojans are stunned and terrified. They interpret this as a sign. Laocoon must have offended the gods by attacking the sacred horse, and this is divine punishment. In truth, in the myth, it's generally Poseidon or Athena who sent the serpents to silence Laocoon and ensure the Trojans fall for the trick. A cruel divine intervention. With Laocoon and his cautionary voice literally snuffed out in front of their eyes, the Trojans overwhelmingly decide to believe Sinon's story. Plus, with the Greeks apparently gone, their confidence is up. King Priam himself says, "Take the horse inside our walls. It's an offering to Athena. Maybe it'll bring us favor." The Trojans, all excited now like we won. War's over. Throw open the city gates. They attach wheels and ropes to the huge horse and begin to haul it into Troy. The whole city turns out to watch. They have to partially dismantle a section of the city wall. Ironically, the impenetrable wall is breached willingly by the Trojans themselves to get the giant horse through. Some accounts mention that as they moved the horse, it twice balked or stopped, and even that the sound of weapons clanging inside was almost heard. But each time the Trojans, in their fervor and with a little divine distraction, ignored the signs. Cassandra, the Trojan princess prophetess, starts screaming that it's a trap. She knows it's full of Greeks. Apollo gave her that foresight. Though cursed, no one ever believes her. True to her curse, everyone ignores Cassandra's frantic warnings. One Trojan even jokes, "Oh, Cassandra, you and your crazy talk." So, the Trojans will this massive horse right into the heart of Troy and set it up in the main square as a victory trophy. Night falls. The Trojans, believing the war is finally over, have the mother of all parties. They are celebrating like never before, drinking, feasting, singing. They've been under siege for 10 years. This is the first time they feel safe. They party hard, and eventually, in the wee hours, they all collapse into drunken sleep. Now's the Greeks' moment. With the Trojans sound asleep and no guards on duty, why guard? The war's over, right? The Greek fleet, which had been hiding, silently sails back from behind Tenedos to the Trojan coast under cover of night. On cue, Sinon, who remained in the city, quietly goes to the horse and opens a secret trapdoor. One by one, the Greek heroes inside the wooden horse climb down a rope. They're armed and ready. They slip through the dark streets and make their way to the city gates. Quickly and quietly, they kill the few unsuspecting Trojan sentries and then fling open the gates. The Greek army, now landed and assembled outside, pours into the city. What follows is the sack of Troy, a night of absolute horror for the Trojans. The city, in drunken slumber, is caught completely off guard. Greek soldiers flood the streets, torching houses and killing anyone they see. Men, women, children. It's a massacre. Some Trojans are killed in their beds before they even wake fully. Others wake to chaos and try to fight back in vain. King Priam, the old king, is jolted awake in his palace. He dons armor, poor old guy, over 70, still trying to fight. Priam's last son, a young prince named Polites, is running through the palace pursued by Neoptolemus, Achilles' fierce son. Polites is cut down right in front of his parents. Priam is outraged and in despair. As Neoptolemus approaches, Priam, though unarmed, curses him. He tells Neoptolemus he has defiled the sanctity of hospitality and the gods will punish him. Neoptolemus isn't moved. He grabs the old king and drags him to the altar of Zeus in the courtyard, the very altar where Priam had supplicated Achilles. There, Neoptolemus mercilessly slays King Priam. Some say he stabbed him, others that he literally hacked him to death. So King Priam dies on the altar of Zeus in his burning palace, marking the end of the Trojan royal line in one brutal stroke. Elsewhere, the carnage continues. Queen Hecuba and the Trojan women, seeing the city lost, take refuge at altars hoping the Greeks will respect suppliants. Spoiler, many Greeks do not. One of the saddest episodes, Astyanax, the little toddler son of Hector and Andromache. The Greeks don't want any male heirs of Trojan royalty growing up. They fear he could avenge Troy one day. So either Odysseus or Neoptolemus, accounts vary, tears the screaming child from Andromache's arms and throws Astyanax off the walls of Troy to his death. It's horrific. Menelaus, meanwhile, has his own objective: find Helen. He barges into wherever Helen is. Some say she was with Deiphobus, a Trojan prince she unwillingly married after Paris died. Menelaus confronts Helen at sword point. At first, he's enraged and ready to kill her for all the misery her elopement caused. Helen, however, is still as beautiful as ever, perhaps even enhanced by Aphrodite at that moment. Depending on the version, either Helen bares her breast and reminds Menelaus of their love, or she just looks at him with those lovely eyes. Menelaus's resolve melts in an instant. He drops his sword and embraces Helen instead of killing her. The classic "the power of love" or lust wins over vengeance trope. So Menelaus spares Helen. Later, as the dust settles, Menelaus will take Helen back to Sparta as his wife again. That must have been an awkward trip home, but apparently love conquers all. The Greek poets kind of gloss over the whole "she caused a war that killed thousands of your countrymen" issue. Inside the temples, a particularly impious act occurs. Ajax the Lesser, the swift, nasty one, finds Cassandra clinging to a statue of Athena for sanctuary. Cassandra, a princess of Troy and Apollo's cursed prophetess, has foresight but has never believed. She foresees what might happen to her but can't prevent it. Ajax the Lesser, in his savagery, drags Cassandra away from Athena's statue. In some accounts, he assaults and rapes her right there in Athena's temple. It's a horrific sacrilege. Even his fellow Greeks are like, "Oh man, that's not okay." And indeed, Ajax's sacrilege will earn him the wrath of the gods on the voyage home. But in the moment, chaos reigns. Cassandra survives the assault only to be claimed as a captive by Agamemnon. Yep, she gets awarded to Agamemnon as war booty despite her shrieks that it will mean doom for him. And indeed, taking her home will lead to Agamemnon's murder, as Cassandra foresees. By morning, Troy is in flames and essentially destroyed. Virtually all the Trojan men are dead. The Trojan women and children who survived are rounded up to be slaves. It's a complete victory and an absolute atrocity. The Greeks gather their spoils and divide the high-profile captives among themselves. Andromache, Hector's wife, is given to Neoptolemus as a slave/concubine. Hecuba, Priam's widow, is taken, in some versions by Odysseus, in others, she goes mad with grief and is turned into a dog by the gods to pity her strange end. Polyxena, a young daughter of Priam, is dragged to Achilles' tomb and sacrificed by Neoptolemus like a blood offering to Achilles' spirit. Achilles' ghost supposedly demanded a virgin sacrifice. The myths can be very grim. One Trojan hero does escape, though, Aeneas. We've mentioned him here and there. Aeneas, son of Aphrodite, a cousin of Hector's. He fought bravely during the war, even was rescued by Poseidon once when Achilles almost killed him, because Poseidon respected his piety. During the sack, Aeneas carries his elderly father Anchises on his back, holds his little son Ascanius by the hand, and with a group of survivors, manages to slip out of the city, helped by Aphrodite and Apollo guiding him through the chaos. Aeneas and his band will later make their way out and eventually sail off. His journey is told in Virgil's Aeneid, where he ultimately travels to Italy to become an ancestor of the Romans. But that's another story, the founding myth for Rome. For now, just know at least one Trojan lineage lives on through Aeneas. So Troy has fallen. The war is finally over. The Greeks have a brief moment of triumph, but honestly, it's short-lived and comes at a staggering cost. And the gods are not finished making them pay for their actions either. The Greeks gather whatever treasure and captives they've won and prepare to head home. They've been away for 10 years, so they're eager to return. However, remember some of the nasty things that happened during the sack? Athena is furious about Ajax the Lesser violating her temple and Cassandra. Poseidon is also angry because, well, Troy was his project too at one point and the Greeks committed sacrilege. They didn't spare suppliants at his altar either. So as the Greek fleet sails out, a massive storm hits them courtesy of Athena, with a boost from Poseidon. Many Greek ships are wrecked in this tempest. Ajax the Lesser meets a fitting end. His ship is wrecked, but he manages to swim to a rock and survive. He boasts arrogantly, "Ha, the gods couldn't drown me." Poseidon hears that and is like, "Oh really?" The Earthshaker then smashes the rock Ajax clings to with his trident or causes a huge wave, and Ajax is flung into the sea and drowned. So much for him. Other Greeks have varied fates on the journey home. This homeward journey of various Greek heroes was itself a subject of lost epics called the Nostoi, or returns. Menelaus and Helen's ship, for instance, gets blown way off course. They end up in Egypt and wander the Mediterranean for years. Per some accounts, Menelaus travels for 7 or 8 years around places like Cyprus, Phoenicia, and Egypt. Eventually, Menelaus and Helen do return to Sparta and, surprisingly, resume their married life. If you're wondering if that was awkward, probably. But the myths say they lived happily enough afterward, perhaps aided by Helen's charm. In one version, they even get to live in eternal bliss in Elysium because Helen is a daughter of Zeus and Menelaus is her husband, so he gets divine favor. Agamemnon, however, faces a dire homecoming. He sails back to Mycenae relatively quickly, taking with him Cassandra as his captive concubine. But back home, Agamemnon's wife Clytemnestra has been nursing a massive grudge for a decade. Recall, Agamemnon sacrificed their daughter Iphigenia. During Agamemnon's long absence, Clytemnestra entered an affair with Agamemnon's cousin Aegisthus, who also had a vendetta against Agamemnon's family. The two have essentially been ruling Mycenae and plotting revenge. When Agamemnon walks into his palace thinking he's victorious, Clytemnestra welcomes him with a deceptive warmth. Then, when he's off guard in the bath, according to one famous telling, Clytemnestra throws a net over Agamemnon and she and Aegisthus butcher him with an axe or sword. Cassandra, who foresees this but no one believes her, of course, is also killed. Clytemnestra kills her too, both out of spite and to silence a witness. Thus Agamemnon, leader of the Greeks, survives Troy only to be murdered by his own wife upon return. Later, Agamemnon's son Orestes will avenge him by killing Clytemnestra and Aegisthus, and then Orestes will be pursued by the Furies until Athena pardons him. But that's another tale of blood and guilt for another time. Odysseus, poor Odysseus, his troubles are legendary. His voyage home is so famous it got its own epic, Homer's Odyssey. Because Odysseus was instrumental in Troy's fall, and he angered Poseidon by blinding Poseidon's son, the Cyclops Polyphemus, on the way home, the gods make his journey exceedingly long and eventful. What should have been a few weeks turns into a 10-year odyssey of island-hopping misadventures. He deals with the man-eating Cyclops, where he famously says, "I am nobody," and blinds the Cyclops to escape, thereby angering Poseidon. The enchantress Circe, who turns his men into pigs for a bit. The alluring deadly sirens. Odysseus stuffs his crew's ears with wax and ties himself to the mast so he can hear their songs safely. Navigates between the monster Scylla and the whirlpool Charybdis. Faces down a bunch of rowdy cannibals, the Laestrygonians. Visits the underworld for advice from the dead prophet Tiresias. Loses all his ships and men when they foolishly slaughter the sacred cattle of the sun god. Zeus strikes them with a storm as punishment. Drifts alone at sea. Gets imprisoned by the nymph Calypso on her island for 7 long years. She kinda loves him and won't let him leave. And after the gods finally make Calypso let him go, he still gets shipwrecked once more in Phaeacia. Eventually, after 10 years of these trials, Odysseus makes it back to his home island of Ithaca, alone and in disguise as a beggar. There he finds things in chaos. Everyone assumed he died, and a horde of 108 obnoxious suitors have overrun his palace trying to court his faithful wife Penelope and planning to kill his son Telemachus. Odysseus, with the help of Athena, reveals himself to his son. Together, father and son devise a plan. In a dramatic scene, Odysseus, still disguised, goes to his palace, strings his mighty bow, a feat only he could do, in a contest that the suitors are holding, and then suddenly throws off his rags, announces "It's me, Odysseus," and proceeds to exact bloody vengeance on all those suitors. With Telemachus and a couple loyal servants by his side, Odysseus slaughters every last one of the suitors in a magnificent purge of the palace. Finally, peace and order are restored in Ithaca. Odysseus and Penelope reunite at long last in one of the most heartwarming moments of the epic. She tests him gently to be sure it's really him, and once confirmed, they embrace. Thus ends Odysseus's long journey, arguably as epic as the war itself. Other Greek heroes have various fates. Nestor makes it home safely, being wise and pious, he had smooth sailing. Diomedes returns to Argos to find his wife was unfaithful. Aphrodite did that to spite him for wounding her at Troy. Feeling unwelcome, Diomedes eventually migrates and founds some colonies in Italy. Neoptolemus, Achilles' son, is warned by an oracle to avoid the sea on the way back, so he travels partly overland up through the Balkans and Epirus, eventually settling for a while. He takes Andromache, Hector's widow, as a concubine/wife, and interestingly marries Hermione, Menelaus and Helen's daughter, at one point. But things don't end great for him either. Depending on the story, Neoptolemus goes to Delphi and gets killed there, some say by Orestes, who was angry that Neoptolemus married Hermione, who Orestes considered his own betrothed. Philoctetes returns to his home, and some say he later goes on to found cities in Italy as well. Helen and Menelaus, as mentioned, eventually make it back to Sparta and live there. Her story diverges in various later myths. Some dramatists imagine Menelaus might have wavered in his forgiveness, but Homer presents them as reconciled. In the afterlife, one tradition says Menelaus and Helen got to enjoy Elysium, a paradise, because they were related to Zeus. So hey, maybe they got a happy ending after all that. And so the curtain closes on the Trojan War saga. Troy is but ruins. Later, people would say you could still see the charred remains of its great walls. The Greeks won the war, but at tremendous cost and with almost as many tragedies as the losers. The Trojan War story became foundational for the Greeks. It was their big cultural memory. They believed it was a real event, and modern archaeology did find a site that is likely Troy, with evidence of destruction around 1200 BCE, which is interesting to think about. The Greeks of later centuries would say, "Oh, that hill over there is Achilles' tomb, and this is where Agamemnon's fleet gathered," etc. Alexander the Great, centuries later, actually detoured to Troy on his warpath to pay homage. Legend says he honored Achilles at Achilles' tomb and even took an ancient shield from a temple, claiming it was Achilles' shield to carry into battle. The Romans, for their part, latched onto the Trojan side through Aeneas. They claimed descent from the Trojan royal line and thus connected their own cities founding to the aftermath of Troy's fall, because the Romans loved a good origin story linking them to heroes of old. Even today, phrases and concepts from the Trojan War abound. The idea of a Trojan horse has become proverbial. Nowadays, a Trojan horse often means some sneaky trick, like malware named after it that sneaks into your computer disguised as something benign. Achilles' heel is a common idiom for a singular fatal weakness. The face that launched 1,000 ships is still used to describe a person of extraordinary beauty. That phrase actually comes from a later poet, Marlowe, referring to Helen. Beware of Greeks bearing gifts. A direct reference to the Trojan horse tale is a saying meaning be cautious of an enemy's generosity. The Trojan War's enduring appeal isn't just in the big battle scenes, but in the very human emotions that drive it. Love, jealousy, honor, pride, wrath, grief, and reconciliation. It's a story where a petty quarrel between goddesses cascades into a massive war, where the love or lust of Paris and Helen causes empires to clash, where pride and anger, like Achilles' rage, lead to catastrophe, and where ultimately compassion, like Achilles relenting to Priam, offers a glimmer of hope amidst the darkness. It's rich with lessons and moral ambiguities. The heroes are flawed and the gods are even more so. In many ways, it was the Greeks' way of exploring the tragedy and cost of war and the extremes of human behavior. And here we are, thousands of years later, still telling this tale. Hopefully my retelling has given you a clear, and perhaps sleepy, overview of the Trojan War's full arc, from its legendary beginning to its bitter end. It's been quite a journey, a bit like your own odyssey through this long story. If you're still awake, wow, I'm impressed. And if you drifted off somewhere in the middle, maybe during one of those many battles, that's perfectly fine. This is a bedtime story, after all. The important thing is that you're relaxed and maybe even dreaming now of ancient heroes and lost cities. Hopefully in a peaceful way, not in a running from Achilles kind of way. At the end of the day, the Trojan War reminds us that even the mightiest city can fall and even the greatest heroes are mortal. But their stories live on, soothing or captivating listeners across millennia. On that note, it's time for us to close the book on this epic tale for the night. The fires of Troy have died down, the sea is calm, and all the warriors' journeys home have, finally, ended. Now let yourself sink into your pillow and find calm. You might imagine the gentle waves on the shore of Troy after the battle, or a clear starry night sky over the Aegean as our heroes sail home at last. The war is over and peace returns. Thank you for listening to this very long story. I hope it kept you good company and maybe even lulled you towards sleep. Feel free to dream of ancient adventures, but remember, in your dreams you control the outcome, so maybe skip the war and have a nice feast with Achilles and Hector instead, or wander the beautiful city of Troy in its prime. For now, I'll simply wish you good night, sweet dreams, and sleep well.